Greetings, marketing students. Dr. Rodriguez back again, continuing our talk on predicting consumers' behavioral intentions. Just to recap, behavior is most influenced by strong, specific attitudes toward the behavior, in other words, attitudes toward very specific behaviors, strong subjective norms, which represent social pressure, and situations that are perceived to be within the person's control. So these three things are the most influential predictors of a person's intentions to perform a certain specific behavior. Now let's apply the theory of planned behavior in marketing strategy. So how do we do that? Well, the theory of planned behavior has implications for marketing strategy because we can use the marketing mix to increase purchase behavior. And rather than just using that managerial intuition and, let's change this, let's change that, I think this will work, we can do it a little bit more scientifically by understanding what influences people's intentions to perform a behavior, such as a purchase. So we can increase strong specific attitudes toward purchasing our product right now. And for this, we would refer back to the attitudes videos from Module 2. So we want to make sure that those attitudes are strong. Then we want to make sure that those subjective norms are strong. And so we can use the marketing mix to increase the perceived positive social pressure. And then we can increase a person's perceived behavioral control in various ways, depending on what the person feels lack of control over. If it's finances, they feel lack of control over purchasing because they don't have the full amount available now. You can offer payment plans or credit or some other buy now, pay later sort of financing terms, which would increase a person's perceived behavioral control if the problem was money. And then we would diagnose the intentions of our target market by measuring these three variables, and we're going to talk about measurement next. And then once we diagnose what needs to be changed in order to increase intentions toward this purchase behavior or particular consumer behavior, then we can design appropriate influence strategies using our marketing mix in order to influence either the attitude or the subjective norms or the perceived behavioral control. Now we will be talking about measuring the variables in the theory of planned behavior. And in particular, our focus will be on these three factors that influence intention. Those are called antecedents. So the three antecedents to intentions and intentions themselves. So in a survey, this is what we would be measuring, particularly if you are conducting the survey with prospective customers, so people who aren't purchasing just yet. But if you did have a database with, let's just say, your customers who are the most frequent purchasers and you wanted to determine what is driving their purchase behavior, then you would also include from that data that you have what their purchase frequency is, how much they spend each time, how many units they buy, and then that would give you the complete model. But today we are just going to focus on the three factors that influence intention and intentions themselves. Because again, intentions are expected to lead to actual behavior, assuming that the person actually does have control over the behavior. Okay, first point in measuring the variables in the theory of planned behavior is that the behavior has to be defined clearly. So that means a specific action, a specific context, a specific point in time. As an example, suppose that we are interested in physical activity as a behavior. Well, you wouldn't just measure attitudes towards physical activity and subjective norms about physical activity. That's way too general. So what you would want to do is make it much more specific, such as exercising for at least 20 minutes, 3 times per week for the next 3 months. And so we would measure attitudes toward that, subjective norms surrounding that, and the person's perceived control to perform that specific action. Next, you want to clearly define the population of interest. Who is the target market that you are interested in influencing or diagnosing their purchase behavior? So for this particular example of physical activity, perhaps it's moms with newborns, who'd be looking to increase their physical activity. It may be overweight teens. It may be senior citizens. All of those would result in very different measurement and different outcomes when measuring these antecedents to intentions. So you want to make sure that you are specifically drawing from the population of interest. And ideally, you would want to interview a small sample from this population of interest to elicit their salient beliefs regarding the attitudes, social pressure sources, and behavioral control factors surrounding this specific action so that you can use those when measuring. So rather than trying to come up with it yourself, it's better to obtain the beliefs directly from the target population. So we're going to formulate items for the direct measures. So for attitude toward the behavior, and these are just examples, my exercising for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months would be bad or good, pleasant or unpleasant. And these are very simple measures, but these are the semantic differential scales. In the past, when we studied attitudes in Module 2, we used a scale from -3 to +3. You could use that. Here it's just a scale from 1 to 7. But the idea is the same, that the smaller number represents the first adjective and the larger number represents the other adjective. And the sets of adjectives should be polar opposites of each other. So bad, the opposite is good. Pleasant, the opposite is unpleasant. And you can see that the question incorporates the attitude described, the action described very specifically. Perceived social norms toward the behavior, and this has to do with what you believe others expect you to do and how others who are important to you behave regarding this specific action. Most people who are important to me approve of my exercising for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months. So this is social approval. Agree, disagree. Most people like me exercise for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week in the 3 months following their major heart surgery. So this is assuming that the target population is people who have had major heart surgery. And so the idea is that other people who have gone through what you're going through perform this action. And so that would create a bit of social pressure. If the target market was the new moms with newborns, then the question might state, most people like me exercised following their first baby, for example. So you'd want to be very specific. And then unlikely to likely. For perceived behavioral control, and again, it's important to get the salient beliefs from people who are part of the target population, because what may hold you back from enacting a certain behavior may be different than what holds back a person who is actually in the target market. I am confident that I can exercise for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months. So confidence in ability is the target control variable there. So the scale ranges from true to false. And then my exercising for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months is up to me. So this is the extent to which you feel that you're in control, that you can decide this. And then behavioral intention. I intend to exercise for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week for the next 3 months. Likely to unlikely. And then past behavior, if you don't have current behavior, but that's not a solid predictor of future behavior. Or if you have that database where you have all of your customers and you know how much they have spent and how often they have shopped, then you could use that as the past behavior as opposed to just asking people how frequently they do something. In the past 3 months, I have exercised for at least 20 minutes 3 times per week.